How's that? Beeps. Good evening, everyone. We will call the meeting to order of the Planning Advisory Committee for July 10th, 2025. Can I have an approval of the agenda, please? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Caroline. I don't think there's anything to add, Lindsay. Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, that is carried. And we have the minutes from June 12th, 2025. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
I will move to approve the minutes of June 12th, did you say?
Yes,
2025.
thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Alan. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, that is carried. Thank you. And now we will move on to public input. Public participation is limited to 30 minutes. Each person will have 3 minutes and may return to speak for one if time permits, with a total of 30-minute period. Questions or comments are to be directed to the chair. Comments and questions that relate to personnel, current or potential litigation issues or planning issues where a public hearing has already occurred but no decision has been made by council will not be answered. Do we have anyone who wants to participate in public input? Yeah, come on up to this mic and say your name. And I know. Cherries go flying.
Hey, everybody here?
Yeah.
Okay. Many of you I know. For those that I don't, I'm Kevin Gildart, and I'm doing some work down the street at 292 Main. I've had conversations over the years with many people on topics that are essentially relevant to this evening. My understanding is that the items that are most let's say, most interesting to people here tonight are proposed density changes in the downtown core, how to deal with parking. I would like to add a corollary, and it should be resident health. So I can talk about density with a certain amount of firsthand knowledge. And many people think density is height, and that's not a bad way to look at it. But the relevance of density as seen through my lens is cost effectiveness. And cost effectiveness for the builder or the developer ultimately translates into cost effectiveness for the resident, and in many ways, cost effectiveness for the town. So just as an example, before we developed the property down the street, the annual tax revenue from that site that I paid to the town was round number $3,500 a year. Our financial model says that when the building's up, our tax revenue to the town will be about $178,000 a year. So what's the essence of $3,000 to $178,000? The cost to the town is not different. Same amount of money to plow the 200 feet of roadway, the 200 feet of sidewalk, and so on and so forth. So it's almost like a bonus of, as I've seen through my lens, of $165,000 a year to the town. So that's density, I guess, as I look at it in terms of what comes back to the town. But the relevant points of density for me are very clearly explained through building two houses. One could be a bungalow, 30 by 50, 1,500 square feet. The other can be a two-story house, 750 square feet of floor. The 750 square foot two-story home takes half the concrete to build your basement, takes half the shingles to build your roof. And believe it or not, the cost of plumbing and electrical is less, because when things flow in straight lines up or down versus out, it makes for huge economic benefit. In our building down the street, as an example, we have two elevators. Those elevators are approximately $400,000 a piece. Those elevators cost me $400,000, whether they go from ground floor to level 2 ground floor to level 3, ground floor, up to essentially level 6 or 7. So the $800,000 that we're spending on elevators, we can amortize over 2 floors, 3. Obviously, the economics of the whole building becomes far better with density. And ultimately that transfers down to what do we have to charge to get a return on our investment, admittedly, and to be competitive with the market and so on and so forth. So there is no substitute for healthy density. And I want to talk about healthy density for a minute. And you can
1 minute left.
1 minute. Okay. So let me talk about healthy density and what I said to this council a couple years ago. I said, do not force me to build parking stalls because parking stalls reward inefficiency. They reward people to have 2 cars or 2 cars in a whatever. So my recommendation to the council was, let me put 2 vehicles in our building and we will share them within the residents of the building. If I was to show you the names of people who have signed leases and are moving into that building, I can tell you that we have clipped 60% of the existing car load of those people who are moving in. We take it, if there were 10 cars, there are now 4. If there was 20 cars in that group, there's now 8. And that's because of 2 things. One is people can walk to services. That's understood. And they can get a car, share it when they need it. So as a developer, you can only afford to give those amenities if the math works. Same thing with fitness. We're putting a fitness room in the building. Fitness rooms don't generate revenue for me, but they're very good for the residents. And so if you're going to be healthy and promote health, density is what is one of the pieces that makes that fit together. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is there anyone online, Lindsay? Thank you. Great, thank you. And our next item on the agenda is new business, and staff will introduce the Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan and the Implementation Framework Package 3. Assume that's you, Lindsay, taking it away. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to take just like 2 minutes to sort of introduce the second half of this meeting and just to give an update on our Housing Accelerator work. So the purpose of this month's meeting is to share some updates to the Housing Accelerator implementation framework. The first will be the non-market housing strategy. So I'll provide you with a presentation going through explaining what that is and help build up some understanding around that work. And then Tristan's going to do a presentation with the recommendations that you saw in package 3. And you will also have noticed in package 3, there was really just 2 updates to that document from this second version, which was the jurisdictional scan and the draft recommendation. So just to give a little bit of a reminder, the purpose of today's meeting is kind of to obtain not necessarily recommendations, but at least to kind of shore up on some of the directions on those 4 areas that Tristan will walk you through and that are packaged in package 3. Once we have recommendations from this committee, we'll go to council and confirm those directions with council, and that will allow us to draft up our new planning documents. So in August, we're going to start the process of drafting those planning documents up if we have enough of a reasonable understanding of the direction that this committee would like us to take that work. And in the fall, once we have for sure those recommendations, we can start to engage the public, send out some mail with information on what's going on, where we're at with those documents, where they can find more information, and we will also host more open houses to share the draft documents. Pardon me. Following that, we can begin the legislative process for adopting those new documents. So that would be public hearings, council meetings, um, and sending that off to the minister for approval. So I've been chatting with our rep at CMHC on our Housing Accelerator file, and we were able to obtain the final extension. I'm so sorry. To our work. So we have until December 30th to finalize any of our action plan initiatives. They're not offering any more extensions to any other municipalities, just given how far into the process we are on this. So just something to bear in mind as we work through this work. Of course, we're not rushing to get to directions, but if you need more information on those items, let us know so we can bring that back to you in a timely manner. And that's all for that part.
Are there any questions on that update from Lindsay? Fantastic. Non-market housing strategy.
Okay, I'll jump right in. Thanks.
He's well trained. Sarah has you well trained.
Okay, so under our Housing Accelerator Fund, we have committed to producing a non-market housing strategy. So this is really a tool to help the town support the sector, encourage the growth, and find different avenues to incentivize and support this sector. So some of the key pieces that we're looking at for doing that we've agreed to do would be a land bank and the disposal process for getting rid of those lands or to pass them on to other hands. We have completed a highest and best use analysis. So you were provided with those parcels of land. That's a preliminary analysis, just for a reminder to allow us to take a look at those and begin the process of determining which are appropriate or where we need to go back and gain more information. Creating a grant program to provide financial support. And our non-market strategy, of course, is the document that is the umbrella for all of this. And that's been informed and will continue to be informed by the non-market housing working group. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time just going through non-market housing, help to build up understanding about what this means. So non-market housing really is an umbrella term. You'll also hear terms like community housing or nonprofit housing commonly used. Generally means the same thing. For better or worse, we're going with non-market housing. And it's an umbrella term for public housing, co-op housing, nonprofit housing, and also can include transitional housing, which could also be referred to as nonprofit housing. The commonalities between all of these are the permanence of affordability. So they do not fluctuate with market conditions. They don't fluctuate with supply and demand. And they offer stable, affordable housing to those who live in them so they can focus on other areas of life rather than stressing about where they're going to make next month's rent or if it will be increasing. Generally rents are offered at or below market with the intention of becoming below market over time. And many of these can be subsidized, particularly the provincial units. And they tend to be offered specifically to people who have low and moderate incomes. So I'm going to go through each of these, starting with public housing. So this refers to housing locally anyhow that is run through the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency. So that's a part of the Nova Scotia provincial government. There are subsidized housing units that they offer to low-income Nova Scotians. The model that is used for these units is rent geared to income. So I believe the ones here are 30% of income, or if you are on income assistance, they use a different metric. These units are maintained, managed, owned, operated by the province, and we have 68 of them. They're up on Woodland and Dale. There's also some on Evangeline, Cherry Lane, and Iona. I think that's all of them. And we have co-op housing. So co-op housing has a different model. It's a democratic model where those who reside in the co-op are members of the co-op rather than being tenants to a landlord. So they have more of an ownership of the dwelling. They elect a board and the members can vote on different decisions that are made, such as operations, expenses, that kind of thing. And the cost of the cost that people are paying with their rent in a co-op would be based on the operating costs rather than just a number that gains profit. So they, would likely store some funds away for repairs and things like that, but rents are stable and they typically become more affordable over time as the mortgage is paid off and operating costs reduce. So examples of those in Wolfville are Tideways and Evangeline, which I think we're all well aware of. And nonprofit housing, owned and operated, of course, by nonprofits. These types of housing units generally are mission driven. They have an intention around providing affordable housing. Often they will have a mandate or a targeted demographic that they're serving. That could be women fleeing violence. It could be students, like we have Student Housing Nova Scotia. It could be a racially marginalized group, for example. And like co-ops, they operate at a rent at cost, so operating cost. And the ones we have in town are the Student Housing Nova Scotia and L'Arche, and L'Arche serve adults living with disabilities. This is just a little snippet from a conversation I had with some staff at L'Arche that I thought was worth bringing to this committee. I was just trying to figure out exactly how they run their units in town and try and learn about if they had plans for expansion or what kind of barriers they're facing. So interestingly, they run 4 small option homes in town. So we had someone in a couple years ago from the province who spoke about the Remedy Act, which was a human rights case that came out from the province to deinstitutionalize people living with disabilities so they can live in community in housing that's indistinguishable from single family homes that we see elsewhere in the community. When asked about expanding, they said that often they talk about expanding, but affording a house in Wolfville feels very out of reach. They're always in need of more rental opportunities for their core members. However, the last time that they had to find housing for their members, it took a year to do so. They say that with the Remedy Act, there will be more of a need for housing as the deinstitutionalization continues. And that residents really want to remain local, but that's a challenge because there's not enough housing and the housing is expensive. And that's the case for both their members as well as their staff. So some pretty big implications there. And I think we can agree that L'Arche is one of the things that brings pixie dust to Wolfville. And we're so lucky to be a L'Arche community. So it's important to recognize the challenges. So in summation, we have 173 units approximately of non-market housing in town. Most of these are 1-bedroom or senior housing, so there's some gaps in what's available in the inventory. And there's a bit of a bottleneck situation happening in some of the family-sized units where kids have grown up and moved out, but the parents are still residing in those units because they lack a suitable alternative to move into. Those are some of the units in town I'm sure you're familiar with. And so this is one of the questions we get asked a lot, which is what's the difference between affordable housing and non-market housing? So, um, anytime we bring a development application to this committee or to council, we get questions often around, well, how many affordable units are there going to be? This kind of thing. And I think the key difference between a for-profit developer and the non-market sector is around that mandate and mission piece, where it's the mandate and mission of a non-market provider to provide housing at or below market rents, where for private developers, it may be something that they genuinely are aiming to do, but often it's tied to a financing program that they are accessing, and it's often time limited. So it might be 10 years. I think the max is 10 years. Um, so it doesn't provide that permanence and stability that the others do that allow people to really lay down their roots and look further ahead. And then the reliance on financing and support. Both sectors rely, of course, on financing, but nonprofits and non-market housing providers tend to lean more heavily, especially for pre-development costs. So that could be professional fees, architecture, engineering, and so on. So 95% of housing in Canada is market housing, which means, of course, 5% on average across Canada is non-market. Um, the reasons why there's so little non-market housing in Canada come down to several factors. One being that most of the federal policy and financing that existed to support this sector evaporated in the 80s and 90s and hasn't seen a resurgence until very recently. It's starting to come up again. There's numbers floating around between 10 to 15 units of affordable housing are lost per every new 1 unit that's built. So even though there is some recent reinvigoration, it's still a net loss situation. The cost of land, particularly in desirable areas, is a huge barrier to the non-market sector, sorry, especially in this world of speculation and investment and just holding land over time. Public perception, NIMBYism is a really big hurdle for this sector, where a lot of people are still feeling a sense of uncomfortability around affordable housing or different types of housing forms in their neighborhoods and what that means for their property values or their quality of life. And that kind of ties into this zero-sum mindset that requires a bit of shift in our communities, where there tends to be a belief that when other people get something, I get less. So there has to be a change around viewing, that the more that others have, the more that we all have as a collective. Um, and again, of course, the commodification of housing and flipping housing, it has also driven up the cost of acquiring housing and land. So that ties into that quote from L'Arche, for example, around just the challenges that are faced. So the consequences of all of those things are some of the aspects that have led us to this affordability crisis that we're in. Wait lists for our units in town are 200 plus families waiting for provincially owned units. Homelessness on the rise, of course, as we've seen here in town, and that dwindling supply. So this is a table, and I apologize, it's hard to see, so I'll read some numbers to you, but this is from the 2024 homelessness service-based count that was done for the Western region. And when this was first done in 2020, the majority of people in the Valley fell under the at risk of homelessness or provisionally accommodated, which means you're couch surfing, staying with a relative, or you're just not sure where next month's rent is coming from. What struck me looking at this is that most people in the valley now are unsheltered, which means they're sleeping outdoors in tents and cars. So the situation is worse. More people are experiencing and at risk of homelessness than prior. And the majority from all of these areas, we have Valley, South Shore, and Tri-County in here. The majority are in the Valley area. Among the top 3 reasons why housing is hard to find is that rents are too high, and the options that do exist are poor quality or do not meet the needs of the tenants. I will shortly step off my soapbox here, but this I think underscores the importance of why we should be encouraging and supporting the non-market housing sector to alleviate some of those stresses in town and provide people with housing that allows them to focus on studies, on work, on raising a family, instead of worrying about what happens next month if they will be rent evicted or lose their unit. Um, and this is the housing continuum, which I've showed you probably 10 different variations of this graphic. This one's annotated with different life events that can happen that can move you either forward or backwards along the continuum. So some of the things that could move you ahead include if you're experiencing homelessness or a type of crisis, someone connects you with services like income assistance or mental health supports, and you can change from being unhoused into transitional or community housing. You can complete education or get a new job or a promotion and move along as well, perhaps into market or owning your first home. And then there are life events that can set you back, and these can vary from things like getting evicted, dealing with domestic abuse, suffering an illness or a job loss, or just retiring and needing to downsize. So there's a very large range of factors that can push you forward or backwards along this, but it's important to know that, or to try to find ways to ensure that there are no gaps in this, so that there are stepping stones to get you from being unhoused into an affordable rental or into market rental, as well as things to catch you if you do wind up having an unfortunate circumstance and there's no community housing for you to land in and you end up in a shelter or in a tent. So whose role is non-market housing? It's all levels of government and of course the non-market housing sector. Um, there's different ranges of policy and funding that come out of each level of government, where the federal government, they create the National Housing Strategy. Housing Accelerator Fund is part of that work. The province, they rent, they own and operate some housing units. They also provide rental subsidies and they deal with emergency shelters. And the town, we deal with land use planning, finance. We also have land. So really we deal with what can go where. So we can create roadblocks or we can remove them. And of course, the housing providers themselves, they can identify and provide opportunities for the individuals that they serve. So speaking with people who work in the sector, I've been asking, where is support most needed? Where are the gaps? So pre-development funds are a big one that keep coming up. Again, those are things like architectural drawings and site plans. There's a big need for operational funding to support staffing. A lot of times these are groups of people who have their day jobs and they're working on the side or volunteering, which means projects take a long time. Other things could include property tax reliefs to a degree, land, parking requirements can be a hindrance, and the municipal process can be lengthy and costly as well. So the housing strategy really is a menu of options for the committee and council to consider for how they'd like to support this sector. They can be tools to support the construction of new housing, to acquire affordable housing that's going to market, and to retain the units that we do have existing. Um, and below I have listed here those three key ways we can support them. This is a little redundant here, but council has some objectives to foster social equity and encourage affordable housing options. So this is a really great tool to bring those into action. And of course, the document is drafted along with members from the non-market working group. So that's to just do a bit of quality control with that work. The actions all fall under three broad categories. So planning, those are zoning categories, expediency with municipal planning applications, and technical professional experience, assistance rather. The financial support, which I just went over, so I won't repeat, and partnerships and collaboration. So the Housing Accelerator is an example of a partnership with the federal government. There's also opportunity to partner with the province and understand their wait lists, ensure that they retain the units that they do have in town, and work with them if they do redevelop these sites. And we can also work with the university to explore some non-market opportunities on campus. I'm just wondering how I'm doing for time. I think I'm okay. I think I'm all right. I just have a couple more. So some of the options that you would have seen in the strategy for a grant program would be things like dollar per door of construction of new non-market housing, things to support those pre-developments, property tax reductions, um, and deed transfer tax support. These are all ones, again, that have been identified through that working group, and we'll bring more information forward on these. I'm not going to go through each of the pieces of the land bank that were provided for in that analysis, but some of the key barriers that continue to come up with that were parking requirements and building height. So that's something to bear in mind as we move through Tristan's presentation. There are other opportunities. This is just the start of that conversation on which pieces of land are most suitable. Are there others that we want to hold on to? Are there others that we want to sell to reinvest elsewhere in the town? And bear in mind that with these sites, there is still some further analysis that's needed. So there could be barriers that weren't addressed in that initial analysis. So looking forward, how can we know that what we're doing is successful? So we've been thinking of different metrics of success. Some of those could be setting a target. Like I said, in Canada, we have 5% non-market housing. Other countries have 15, 20, 30%. We could also maintain an inventory of the wait lists for some of those units and try and watch and see if those are growing or shrinking. Upgrading our housing needs assessment to understand how many folks are living in core housing need, and looking at who we know is in particular need, whether those are students or seniors, and trying to target how we fund or support the sector based on those needs. And this is a collection of things that Tristan had compiled through the public engagement session. So we know based on public input at committee meetings, when there is a development application, that people are interested and always looking for information on affordable housing. And the open houses and the survey were also an opportunity to see the emphasis on this reiterated. Folks are looking for mixed income neighborhoods and housing units, so to not divide communities based on income, looking for students and senior housing, accessible units that are also affordable, and ensuring things like walkability and green spaces are within reasonable proximity to ensure that the quality of life and other household costs are reduced. Um, so I just wanted to share that with you. I think it's helpful to know that people are mentioning this, even though we didn't particularly engage specifically on this topic. And that's it for me. I just have the images of the land here, but I'm not going to walk through those. So
Thank you, Lindsay. Lots of great information there. You want to entertain some questions?
sure.
Okay. Any questions for Lindsay on her presentation? Go ahead, Alan. Thanks.
So waiting for someone else to go.
No, you go first.
Okay.
Pick it up.
So we noted in the report as one of the recommendations, sorry, can you hear me?
Mhm.
I'll speak into the microphone. The property tax reductions. So I think it was indicated somewhere around 50% or 30%. There's a better ratio. Is there a thought of doing 100% relief?
We haven't really settled on anywhere. Of course, we have to go through a process to get to that number. We could look at doing any range. There's other municipalities that will do phased assessments. Some will do 50%, others do 100. There's lots of room to explore.
Okay. The follow-up question to that too was, I think it indicated there was sort of a question around length of time that the tax relief would be in place. So I think it was in perpetuity was an option, and then for a few years was another option. The only suggestion I would make is a longer period that you have available for that relief, obviously the better in terms of the operating expense for that use. It also allows them to potentially go to borrowers and look at their debt servicing ratio a little bit differently. So it is beneficial. So the longer you have it, the better, obviously. Kind of saying a duh statement, but yeah, it does have knock-on impacts for what they want to do further on. So
Thank you. Any other questions? Are you looking for some sort of recommendation from us at this point? Just wanted to share that information.
Just for information.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
At the recent Wolfville Area Interchurch meeting, I was asked to look at what things were like 25 years ago and what the difference is between what was between then and now. And as you mentioned, the federal funding was crucial to a lot of those housing repair projects and the hearth homes and that kind of thing. What I think is crucial is upfront funding, which is what used to be available. But I feel like a lot of things are stymied because that support isn't there. And I don't know if having a land bank here can provide that many units. Looking at the so-called lot on my street, it looks like a single family home, maybe a duplex, but a fourplex would be huge on that site. And I'm wondering if that's the case for all of the town properties in terms of volume or size.
Shall I respond?
You go right ahead if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, the Kent Avenue piece of land certainly is the smallest. What I'm hearing preliminarily from non-market working group is there's sort of a critical mass aspect to being able to bring a new nonprofit housing provider into town. So we do have 2 existing ones. So that could be a desirable piece of land for them, but to attract a new provider, they would be looking to do a minimum number of units. I don't know what that is, but tends to be a bit higher than 4 units, that's for sure. So that's part of the process, is going through those pieces of land and looking at what actually works for the needs of the sector. So we have some reviewing to do for sure.
Caroline?
I am actually on the non-market committee, and I think it's just a clarification. So, Lindsay, are we as a group going to talk about it more, or is this now? I thought what we had come up with, depending on what feedback we got from this group, this would go to council, or are there decision points we still need our input on? I'm just not quite clear on that.
Yeah, I think more analysis is needed on those lands in order to have enough information for the committee to recommend which lands would reasonably go in the land bank, just to give more confidence around what could feasibly go on those sites. That's part of the exercise, is understanding if we do a highest and best use analysis with what our current zoning enables, and it doesn't meet the needs of the sector, we have to go back to the drawing board, because we have agreed to provide a land bank, and it doesn't make much sense to have provided a land bank if nobody can build on it. So so once we get through the plan review process, that can help inform what can actually happen on those lands in particular. So there's some more analysis required.
Okay, but the part of the Housing Accelerator Fund piece was around developing a strategy. And the market analysis is just one piece. But do we, as a working group, need feedback from this group, or is it council we need feedback from? I'm perhaps not understanding where we go next.
Sure. Is it okay to?
Yep, go right ahead.
So the working group will make a kind of your recommendation, and then I will share that with this committee, and they
Okay.
can debate or require further analysis if required.
Any other questions? Can I ask one? So I'm going to assume that this went through that working group, the non-market, and this was the land bank and all of the suggestions that came out of that are what these are. We will then look at this package through the lens of, if these are the land that we have earmarked, that we make sure that the zoning we put in place enables something to go there, should we want to do that in each of those spots, or not each of those spots, whatever, if start to tick some off or not. So now we're just getting that, and then we'll look at the recommendations through the rest of the zoning changes and come back with a full package with this embedded in it. Or it will go to council. Maybe both? Okay. Okay. Okay, fair. Okay, great. Just wanted to be clear where I was going next. Okay. Everybody good? Oh, sorry, didn't see your
Super
light. My apologies.
I just had one more question about the deed transfer component. So are we able to actually just exempt certain people from?
We have a policy.
Other municipalities are doing things like issuing a grant of value after, so it's sort of an exchange of check. There could be a day where asking letter of support to enable the municipalities to waive deed transfer tax for their government.
Right. So we don't have a policy on deed transfer tax as CMG, but we do on our tax rates, right? Because we do have some places that get tax breaks. But I'm not sure that non-market housing is part of that. Is it? No, didn't think so. Okay, something to look at maybe. Okay, thank you. So the next one's gonna be, are you done of yours, Lindsay, and would you like to move on to presentation from Tristan, Happy Cities? So you're gonna present on each topic, correct, Tristan? Then give us, you're gonna present 5 minutes, we're gonna chat for, ask for questions for 10 or 15 minutes, and then go to the next one. Just, so we don't get to the very end and then have a whole bunch.
Yes, that's the intention.
Correct.
So in previous talk, whole presentation, then we had conversation. We think in this case, you're now pretty familiar with the landscape, what we're talking about. So we think it'd be more appropriate to go through section by section, especially since we're presenting you with very specific recommendations, get more specific feedback. I think it would be appropriate to combine the heritage and downtown growth sections. So we'll have 3 conversations. I think 15 minutes would be a good amount of time for each section. And then at the end, we can come back to any topic, but just so we can try to get your.
Sure.
So just to start with the timeline. So what we're asking for today is not a formal recommendation to council, but just feedback as per usual, which we will then take to council. Then the council will give the decision on whether to analyze these recommendations in greater detail, to do the next steps of analysis, but also really detail what the land use bylaw changes, regulatory changes would look like. So we're not asking for your permission to do the final version of the plan, but to take those next steps to flesh things out. We're not asking for 100% agreement today. We know that that's very hard to achieve. What we are asking for is if you think that this is close enough to go to the next step to get those new details, that's the level of support we're hoping for. And also keep in mind that we are balancing very, very different perspectives on a lot of these ideas. So the question is really, is this a fair note that we've struck where we've done and we're again taking a variety of kinds of feedback. Sorry, folks at the bottom of the screens can be covered. Some things can't be avoided. So public feedback, the open house and survey, planning advisory committee feedback, the housing accelerator fund commitments we said we would achieve, and also the technical analysis and our professional feedback, because as professionals, we have a responsibility to make sure that these recommendations are achievable. So first topic, heritage. What we heard from you was to focus on the highest priority buildings and really give strong protections for them. Don't lay complex heritage protections across the downtown in general. Generally use character protections, focus on the character of the downtown. Do not, and also try to protect the views and do not put max width requirements that would be too onerous and would stop development. So recommendation 1, identify the highest value buildings for heritage protection, with some feedback from some members of PAC, Beverly and Councillor Wendy. We selected a few buildings that we think are especially important from a heritage perspective. So the way that these would be protected is that their height limits would be reduced to 2 stories. If someone wanted to build something there, they still could do so. They would have to bring a development agreement forward to increase that height limit. And that negotiation process would be the form to do things like protect the facade or decide what things can be done to protect that heritage value while redeveloping that site or repurposing the building. The second recommendation is to update the design guidelines to protect those heritage components, the character components of the downtown. Excuse me. So we're discussing later that most of the downtown will be, will no longer rely on development agreements, but site plans. But site plans do still offer the opportunity for the design review committee to provide that feedback to see whether the developer's proposal for how they would fulfill these character requirements actually fulfill them or not. So we'll be reviewing the design guidelines, but also updating the land use bylaw with a few firm requirements to protect character. So one of those is setting a maximum width for shop fronts in the central area of Main Street, so that you maintain that consistent, diversity of shops as you walk down the street. In terms of maximum lot widths, we're not sure if we're moving forward with this idea. This idea again was to make sure that you don't get someone acquiring an entire block and redeveloping it with one or two buildings. More analysis needs to be done on whether legally setting limits on the width of new lots is would be feasible. But if we do go forward with this, the goal would be to be relatively permissive, so about 100 feet width. The latitude 45, for example, is 200 feet, so just to give reference. But that 100 feet would still be wide enough that development would still be feasible. You could still bring, 2 or 3 buildings together, but not an entire block. And there was this request from the committee to protect view corridors. We're suggesting 2 corridors to protect. One from this corner of Harborview and Main of Blomidon. The second down Central Ave to the farmland and beyond. So that is heritage protections. For downtown growth, we heard that there was support for extending the downtown zone, the C1 zone, but not to Locust and Seaview specifically. Do not establish excessively restrictive rules for these new areas that we're adding. There was some ideas earlier of quite restrictive rules, but people are asking for C1 with a few adjustments. And there was feedback that 5- and 6-story height limits are too high for Main Street and Front Street. And also that the public benefit negotiations of development agreements are divisive. So perhaps we should try to achieve our goal with clear rules and not through negotiations and development. So we did propose to expand the downtown everywhere in the strict areas, in the east, the south, also along the rail lines and a little bit to the north next to the waterfront. And we are proposing to add some lines of text, paragraph in the text of the C1 zone, explaining that in certain streets, there's a few adjustments to these requirements. So specifically allowing or requiring larger setbacks so that the new buildings would line up with existing residential buildings that don't come right up to the sidewalk. So there is a bit of a front yard, a bit of a green buffer there with the sidewalk. This is an area where there could be other adjustments to help transition areas like Summer Street into a C1 that's in the future. So if there's other things you want us to think about, definitely an area. Then height limits. So we did stick with 4 stories throughout most of the downtown. We just switched it from 4 stories requiring a development agreement to 4 stories, not as of right, but by site plan approval. So you still have that need to meet the heritage guidelines and other requirements, a bit more of a back and forth. And there are 6-story buildings proposed in 2 contexts. One is areas that are a bit less visible. So in this northwest area next to the former train tracks, near the municipal building, these are less visible from the main street. So if there is taller buildings there, perhaps it would be less of a negative impact on the heritage of Main Street. There's also those 2 buildings, 3 properties that are owned by Cadia. One is that the subways?
Yeah.
The subway lot next to the church. and the other is next to the stadium. The motivation here is the town is in the early stages of a process of discussing with them what kind of housing building they can provide there. They want to be flexible and enable Acadia to establish new sources of income and to make these developments viable. So there's multiple motivation for that, but you know, we don't know yet. It might turn out that it's not viable at 6 stories either, or a smaller building might make sense. But the goal here is to flag for you that, you know, there's a desire to be flexible with height on those two specific ones. The other context in which higher buildings might be permitted is for projects that are, don't want to get this wrong, include a major non-market housing component. So this is not 1 or 2 units, and this is not market affordable units. These are non-market units, so run by a nonprofit organization. If allowing a bit more height makes such an intrinsically affordable project possible, we want to provide flexibility. Okay, so that is Heritage Downtown. So at the timer right here.
Okay. First question. Heritage Downtown. Yeah, Deputy Mayor?
Can you just, it was sort of the very first slide and you talked about, there are already properties that are protected, which I know which ones they are. How many do you have suggested? And I don't know if it was yellow. Yeah, that one. And
So-
can you point out, like, just for me, I'm map challenged sometimes, to tell me which ones they are, if you know off the top of your head. I know the dark ones, but
This is,
yeah,
this is just those buildings just across the road.
it's a Herbens?
Urbans.
This is the graveyard, it's not a building. And this is the,
Library.
and in terms of the new buildings, you have Church Brewery here,
Okay,
Baptist Church here.
Okay.
You have the 2 banks here.
okay.
You have this older commercial buildings next to the former gas station. And here you have
Weird.
this-
Sorry, just
Do that one again?
do that one. That's on, do you know?
That,
Oh, is that where? the-
Angle and Bokers?
no,
No,
that's,
so Wild Lily
that's
is?
a little series before Wild Lily of very traditionally sized and spaced buildings. One is Pronto Pizza,
Oh, and Juniper.
Juniper, and there's a third one. No, not the bookstore. No, that's a newer building. Maybe it is just the 2, but they are very traditional Wolfville
Okay.
retail spots.
Okay.
Good.
This one is post research of the history in the area emerged there's this new story of this Andre that was an early Black family.
Oh, yeah.
So there's some heritage, you know, really historical heritage value to that place. So that is next to the Legion. There.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Can I just add?
Yeah, please.
One of the structures that has been highlighted in yellow is next door to the Whittle. But it's 3 buildings in one. It's a very old frame. It's where the original market was.
Okay.
And there's several shops there now and the
Valley Girl and
Valley Girl and the yarn shop and the beer.
the beer.
The
salt-
beer
salt-
place.
Salt box.
Okay.
Yeah, and apparently, I don't know, planners at the back, there's 5 units going in behind
Salt box.
the salt box, right?
Apartment. Housing. Okay. Good. Al?
Yeah, I just had a question about this one. So maybe just late in the day for me. So protect the highest value buildings for heritage protection, protect them by reducing height limits to 2 stories, but allowing them to do increased height through development agreement. Is it only height, or would the expectation be they can also go horizontal as well too, or into adjacent lots?
Restriction on our ability to consolidate with adjacent lots. They
Okay.
just need to protect those elements of the buildings that have been identified as valuable for heritage.
Perfect.
Wendy?
I just wanted to reiterate what Bev Boyd wrote in a letter earlier this week. I agree with everything she said. And I think her point about the old railway station, now library, is really important, being a National Historic Site. I think if you put up a 5-story building in front of that, you lose a lot of the heritage value. So just wanted to reiterate that.
Jen, did you have another question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
okay. Yeah. Caroline?
I mean, the idea of 2 stories, if that's how they were original and from a heritage point of view, it's important. But to then have a very tall building, you know, to suddenly go up to 4 stories and 5 or 6 potentially, could, it seems a little, it may change. I feel it could change the character of the street, and I don't know how you address that. So I don't know whether that means we have to think about the extra height we're thinking to give to the rest of the area.
Just to clarify, development agreements with the heritage allow 4 stories unless there was a major number.
Any other questions or comments on heritage downtown?
So the maximum width, there was something here, you talked about the historic character on one slide. Sorry. The first, it says set maximum width, character protections recommendation 2, set a maximum width.
Commercial spaces. Space,
Okay.
so you have instead of just one wall.
Okay, so that 100, around 100 feet that they were talking about, it wouldn't be one building's, one commercial property wouldn't be allowed to be 100 feet or
That's
whatever it's set at.
There's stronger. Point
Okay,
than
okay, okay. I just found that a bit confusing. Thank
the
you.
sure.
Anyone else? Questions or comments?
Housing accelerated company. So which are to amend the bylaw to increase building capacity. We're effectively skirting the minimums of that. But it is substantial to allow 4 stories without the homeowner's process.
Any other questions on that? Sight lines, anyone have any comments on the sight lines going, those were good? View corridors? Al? Al, just one sec, Al?
The only one I like these, they're fine. I just also really like it from Clock Park as well too. So, and from
Yes.
the library. So.
Yeah.
I also like the view from Clock Park and from the library as well too. So I'm just saying I like them. I don't know if you have to keep them. That's just my opinion. So.
Yeah. I would concur with that one. Caroline? You're good? Okay. Can you flip through those one more time just to go, to make sure we hit the points, go back to heritage and just so recommendation 1, those are the proposed, the ones that are already protected and proposed. I don't have anything to add to those in particular. Yeah. To designate it, okay, character protections. So that would be increasing the review guidelines. Right. So I like this. I like to have the review of the design guidelines in there to make sure that character, because the characters for me is what the heritage is important, but the character of it is also important. And I think that then when you piece them all together with sightlines, height, character, and the width, whatever that overlay looks like, because it does become really bizarre looking. I think if you have, oh, this is really, this big long building that's all these modern facades, and then these other ones you have character, and who's determining what character is are we going to write that before we approve it? Because I think that's also important, because character to me might be something different to Al. And then if those ones that are in there that are proposed to be protected, and you put massive 4-story, 6-story building beside it, I think it'll look ridiculous. And the character, even though you kept the character of that one, it will look like a dwarf thing that you just left behind. So I think it has to be thoughtful in the way it's done, just not, oh, it can be 6 stories everywhere else except for what's protected, or 4 stories, or whatever the determination is at the end of this.
I guess, yeah, what makes me wonder at this point is if you open it up because of housing accelerator demands to let more things happen, are we really protecting anything? Like how much are are the federal rules impinging on what we might see as character? And can we maintain a public process or just site approvals? Because that makes a difference too.
Al?
Oh, it's totally gone out of my head. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So there's the density requirements under the HAF, which I think we'll talk to in a few minutes. Are there specific ones for height? And then the second part of that question is, and it goes to the density one as well too, what happens if you don't meet them under the agreement? I will do my best. So there's density requirements that are identified in the document under HAF. We've referenced some height change requirements under HAF. So I'm wondering what those actually are. Specified minimum, but that, yeah.
That's why story limit back his feedback from last time of this advisory committee. There's actually some communication sufficient. So it's not a hard legal.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
No.
So in our agreement, with UHC, we have 4 stories we have agreed to increase the building height in the downtown. Currently, we allow 3 stories, so if we allow 4 stories in the downtown, that checks the box. Don't fulfill our agreement, we money back. So we have committed to increase building height in the downtown. How high or planning that goes through is not dictated.
So if, yeah.
I should say they're being somewhat generous.
Because we took the money.
4 stories. Switching it from.
No. So I'm gonna take a little bit of issue because the only way then, because I like 3 stories, and if it's gonna go to 4, if that's what is agreeable, then the design guidelines and a development agreement, because there has to be some kind of character check on that building, because otherwise it becomes it does not fit what I believe downtown of Wolfville to be. Actually makes me quite.
So just to clarify, make sure. So these design guidelines, they would still be required to, and they would still go through the design review committee. It'd still be a review process. Be ready to go.
Well, and maybe it should. So I guess let's talk about whether that should or shouldn't, and that doesn't have to be done right now, but maybe that's a council decision whether it should or shouldn't. And then if it's, I've always found the review of the design guidelines a little bit ambiguous and not necessarily stringent rules. So maybe we need to determine what those are on a little clearer output.
I just want to be clear from what Lindsay said, that you said the Housing Accelerator Fund is contingent upon that we increase the building height. I had no, like, I didn't know that we would have to increase it. So are you saying that we would increase it? It's okay if you increase it by development agreement? Or you're expecting this committee and council to just increase it to 4? That's my, like, I had no
That's what
idea.
I just heard. but
Okay, that's what
that
I
would be
heard. I just,
news.
and that's new to me.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
Two sides of the federal government. The previous council included a building height initiative. So that's yes, so to amend my law to increase building height maximum. Encourage low carbon density. So we can get back to you with our specific options that would be the housing accelerator.
Thank you. Alan? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you could give a snapshot of what the design review committee is responsible for and what they do. Snapshot.
Yeah, camera. Okay.
They provide advice and plan. Yeah, essentially they.
And yeah, I think it's from clarifying. What's this? I think that's a good job there. If we've got an option, we can do development agreements that come through the planning advisory committee, the council. Currently, we've got a situation where we are using a site plan approval process in the house. Done that on a couple of projects on the 11th, one just across the street, the grocery store. Currently is referenced earlier on Front Street. And these site plan approval processes are a staff exercise primarily, but it does involve a design review committee. Design review committee is made up of local architects and designers. And the process is that we bring a proposal forward to them. When we receive an application within the design guideline area, which currently is everything on Main Street and a few other side streets, Lower Westwood, those areas adjacent to the street. Currently, it's so there's an application on Main Street within those design guideline areas, and that boundary is something. It comes to staff, we do a review, we work with the applicants on details, we bring the initial design to the design review committee, we sit around this table, and the developer's architect makes a pitch to explain how their proposal meets the design review, or sorry, the design guidelines. It's fair to say that those are not necessarily perfect. There might be room for those. There might be stringent descriptions. They are guidelines, so they're somewhat interpreted. So that design review committee hears from the developer's architect to back and forth, and that has worked well in the past. It has generated a better product in the end. So whether that needs to go to council, PNC and council to do another kind of review, that's up to council. Staff believe that review process is more fair and well.
Know that if it's development agreement for 4 stories, that won't be. So we are.
What I think.
19 minutes.
Okay. There's lots of
light.
Lots of light on. All right, so I think this is important. So let's, maybe the next one won't be as long. So let's go one more round and then we'll move on. Al?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to be fast, so we're low on time. So I would just say, so there's a few things around height that you can consider. One is, the sheer height itself doesn't have to match what the exact street wall is, so you can have a step back. So there's potential to increase height without actually having sort of a large facade in front of you. So that's something you can cover in the design guidelines. One of the other things I would mention, so a colleague of mine, Aaron Murnahan, he's running the HALF program at HRM right now, but he used to run the heritage program. And so there's this push-pull factor with heritage conservation. You have a property that has very specific architectural requirements, certain building techniques, they become more and more expensive as time goes on, replacement is more costly, et cetera. So there has to be some level of trade-off between maintaining that character that people really value and does add value to the town, and the ability for the property owner to actually deal with those ongoing costs. And so there's provincial grants that apply to it. There was consideration in this as well too, I think, for heritage grants to help maintain as well. But they're usually fairly small amounts, $10,000 that will get you a few windows potentially if you have to do the whole thing. So one of the ways to deal with it in Halifax is by providing situations like this where they can increase density in a sensible way. It has worked considerably well in a lot of developments throughout the city. And if it's a question, I think Aaron would be very comfortable coming down here and having a chat about how they've effectively managed those while maintaining the character of those communities. In the North End, in particular, they've done a particularly good job. The other thing I would mention too is there's also a bit of a disincentive if you restrict too much. So the way the Heritage Act is drafted now, if someone has a registered status and they want to tear it down, they wait 3 years, it's gone. So you have to balance out that push-pull factor to some degree. So, and I think this meets some of those requirements. If there's more precise design considerations regarding height, I think they can be dealt with in the design guidelines.
I think this is just more administrative. I had actually been looking online, and so I found when I was looking the letter addressed from the Minister of Housing to Mike Savage around the Housing Accelerator Fund, what they were approved for, what they had to do. And so from a transparency point of view, I would really like to ask that our letter, which if Halifax is public, I don't understand why ours isn't. If we could have our letter made public, and also the budget and the expenditures to date and what we have left, because I know this is slightly different, but we talked about the non-market housing strategy, and there is supposed to be grant funding for that. And it would be nice to know what was actually approved and if we're still on target for that. So it may be a bit of a diversion, but I think it's an important transparency piece.
I think that goes through our audit, does it not? Our audit committee, whether our funding, how much is in our HAF fund? Did we look at that? I know we've talked about it a few times, so.
We have revenue that's brought in.
Mhm.
That's associated with it. As cycle of 2 years. Don't know if it's not a specific piece that we speak about at our audit, but it is coming through.
Wendy?
There was an occasion a year or so back that I got to sit in, online with, the members of the design review committee, and the architect that was presenting, and it was super, super interesting. I personally think, and having talked to John Whidden, who's the heritage rep on that committee, that it would be useful, sort of a bridge to have a member of this committee on that one so that there is some back and forth. Because right now it's chunk.
Mm.
We hear yes or no,
Mm.
but they bring up so many interesting aspects. So I don't know if that would be difficult. It would add another body, but I think it would be super interesting.
I don't know if that's exactly it too, but I think it would be an interesting thing for us to see what, even if it was a mock one, to see what they did to walk through one and how they got to their place, because I don't think I have ever seen anything. I mean, I see the end result and maybe even the beginning of the result, but what happens from that, more from one to the other? I don't know that I've ever seen that in a meeting or.
Well,
or
When
anything
you,
between.
when you have two architects asking questions of a third architect, it gets really meaty.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Might be over my head. I'm not really sure, but I think it would be fun to try. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, we're on this slide. We'll flip through, but does anyone have any strong feelings about 6 stories in those 2 spots? Yeah, if you would like to speak, put your mic on, please.
I am on the non-market housing working group, but I do feel that we need to get it right for the town first, because we need to make sure that people don't say, oh, well, that's 6 stories because it's non-market housing with a negative connotation. I'll leave it to that.
Thank you. And one is right beside the subway and the other one is President's Field? Yeah. I don't like either of them. I think the one right beside Subway is going to look like a brick wall as soon as you come into town. Doesn't matter what the church looks like beside it. The church is on a big grassy green, beautiful hill and it looks lovely. And then there's going to be a wall, literally, if it's 6 stories high, above a 1-story building. But that's my personal.
So with applying like heritage characteristics to a 6-story building, how's that done? Like, do heritage characteristics scale up to that height?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, good.
Clearly, with context, just traditionally buildings. But there are many examples. Buildings keeping the same accurate form. So if you visit Old Quebec, for example, 2-story buildings that feel very much part of Old Quebec and 6-story buildings have the same design features. And still, it's good.
Right.
Just for clarity, I don't think any of the 6-story areas are the ones that are protected or proposed to be.
It's a parking lot.
Yeah, they're just adjacent to, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would be.
It'd be a new build. Characteristics. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. All right, so we'll just skim through these. So did anyone have any issue? The last question I'm going to ask is, did anyone have any issue with the expansion of C1? Because that was the last part, correct? Right, with some front lawns that makes it look like they are. Hearing no main objections on the C1. Okay, move on. Next one, parking.
So. You mentioned last time, support for providing a public park place as long as there's a land swap. The feedback from the PAC was support for creating the last time. To adjust the design of the concept drawing that we showed you to be thinner, to hug the edge of the farmland better, and down Central Ave to farmland, and support for reducing parking requirements for. So recommendation one is to do that land swap to open up some existing farmland for a parking lot that would turn some into farmland. Recommendation two is to design the parking to be long and narrow as was requested by the PAC last time. So someone suggested to drape the parking lot along the edge here, which is here. There's no parking lot here, parking spot here. View here is hindered by the fact that the land slopes downward. So part of this parking we think would be not be visible. A lot of the details here, such as where buildings go precisely, are very early stages. It won't look exactly. Then this by creating this new public parking spot, we open up current parking spots for new purposes. So if this no longer needs to be a parking spot, then we could create more space for public space we discussed previously. So recommendation 3, repurpose for non-market housing. So this will something like here, and space was. And recommendation 4. So this slide about using incentives to encourage redevelopment of parking lots on Front Street and other opportunity sites. This was previously part of the growth scenario section. We moved it to the parking section because based on public feedback and some PAC feedback, it was really clear that this is more than anything is a parking issue for people. We need to address where people are going to park if we're going to build new housing on. But assuming we can address that need for abundant parking, we are proposing to utilize Bill 177, which is a bill that allows towns to identify areas for to incentivize redevelopment, and it allows the town to reduce the property taxes for up to 10 years, so it gets phased in. Then recommendation 5 is to implement paid parking downtown, which is a difficult pill to swallow. And 2 proposals are, we propose 2 things to help make it more desirable to have paid parking. First is to structure it in a way to maximize the amount of turnover so that we will get the most use out of those parking spots. So instead of just putting in a flat parking fee, we want to explore the idea of something like variable price parking, which parking will be price will be higher on streets with very high demand, and lower on streets with lower demand, full of ensuring there's always one parking spot open on. So it's somewhat less convenient because it's paid. It's actually more convenient because there's more spots consistently available. Secondly, recommendation 6, we offer free parking, where we discussed previously, but then also provide lots of wayfinding, make sure it's very easy for people to find it. And I should say, third of all, to use the funds for public benefits such as a downtown improvement. There was questions about once the town hires a parking enforcement officer with funds that be left over, it would cost roughly $100,000 after benefits to have such an officer, but we feel that that is something the town will need at some point. Generally speaking, parking revenue is cash positive. So we're paying for that in 5 months. There are other ideas for how these funds can be used, potentially transit or things, but then recommendation 8 is a bit about potential for how parking management can be as a whole. So first of all, establish parking enforcement. That's really something the town needs to ensure that parking. Collaborate with the community to align parking pricing and parking strategy, because right now there's a disconnect between they charge currently free parking for the rest of the town. Explore options to manage parking impacts in residential streets. If this is a concern or becomes a problem, perhaps the town can explore permanent parking for certain streets that are so the residents have access to those. And for parking requirements, the feedback from PAC was to reduce parking requirements. We started exploring what strategies for reducing parking requirements can we, excuse me, allow developers, you know, if they have a certain number of parking spots for, what's it called now? Shared cars.
Car share, yeah.
Car share.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You just said it reverse, it's good.
Yeah, yeah. You know, e-bike chargers, shared
Mhm.
bikes, what have you, that you could reduce those parking requirements. You know, the goal of reducing parking requirements is in part to encourage more development, to encourage more housing construction, to reduce the cost of making these applications. And we would actually be making the process more complex by adding in these features. And we believe we actually achieve the same thing just by eliminating the parking requirement. This does not mean that there would be no parking spots provided in development. Most applications coming to the city, developers very much want to provide parking. Often funders require a certain amount of parking. But this is becoming the norm in the profession, the best practice, because there's been a recognition in urban planning that there is no effective way for urban planners to set a rule that accurately reflects the amount of parking that is going to be required to develop. And the most effective strategy that's been identified is to allow the market developers to propose the amount that they think will match the needs there. And you know, another important thing to consider here is that the oversupply of parking, it was once considered to be a social good, but it's now regarded as a social negative. Because if we provide too much parking, it can create problems for runoff, or undermining walkability by creating gaps between destinations. So, you know, it's important goal in planning now to right size the amount. So that's the parking section.
Comments, questions on parking? Mayor?
I'm not opposed to like the parking permits and like the scales of parking the further you are from Main Street. So are you suggesting that the parking that's further from Main Street would be free? And so that would be more longer term? And then can you just remind me, and maybe I should know this because I think of the age demographic in our town and the accessible parking spots, right? So I would want to have the same amount of accessible parking spots closer to the stores. You don't have to pay for those though, do you? I don't know. I actually don't know. So excuse my,
So to answer
You?
the first part of your question, the accessible parking spots absolutely remain. Would those be? I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a.
okay.
Now, would the streets be free the further you get from downtown? Those details haven't been worked out. I think that's.
But when you suggested free, sorry, when you suggested free, where were you suggesting?
Oh.
Like on a scale, like I'm not opposed to paid parking, you know, per se, but sort of like
The new stuff.
the new stuff would be more free. It's further from like the Main Street. So the closer you kind of get to having, you know, quote unquote, the good parking spaces that people drive around to get would be more like paid.
That's-
That would make sense in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Mike?
I just have a question. I'm struggling a little bit with the parking lot on the farmland. And to me, it's more of a chicken egg kind of question. Like I would hate to see recommendation one, we're going to pave part of the farmland and then something happens and all of a sudden nothing else happens and we've just paid farm. So it would help me and a couple people I've talked to, maybe there was a little bit of an order, like that wouldn't happen until other buildings were built or other parking lots were eliminated. You know what I mean? Like, I think I just need a chronology kind of thing. I don't need specific times, just this happens before this would happen kind of thing.
I agree with that. I almost feel that, I think it's the parking management. Like, you know, if we do that first, particularly the piece about collaborate with Acadia and align, that maybe we don't need that many spaces. And so maybe we need to think about the order. And the only other thing that strikes me is if we do decide we're putting in these parking, new parking, recognizing that was the only option we gave them when we did the questionnaire. We didn't talk about microtransit and improving that. So it was, you know, do you want parking, more parking or not? Then the questions, you know, for most is going to be yes, whereas if the question had been different, but that's beside the point. But if we're going to do parking, can it be, maybe it's surface level parking, but you put a couple, you could then provide those lots to non-market housing groups for a couple of stories on top. Just a thought. But that comes later.
Andy? That's interesting. I just, for those who aren't aware, Wolfville used to have parking meters until the 1960s, when the local merchants concluded that parking meters were driving people to shop in New Minas. So there's that.
Al, do you have a question, comment? No? Okay. Anyone else have a Caroline, your lights on?
Oh,
Did you have
well, actually, this is just a comment around the accessibility parking, and I totally agree we should have it. But in other communities, sometimes there is a limit on the amount of time that in the UK, I'll use, people apply for a permit and they have to display it, and a little dial, and it shows when they arrived, and it says, you know, you can have accessible parking here for 3 hours or whatever it is. But I don't know if Nova Scotia have ever looked at something like that, but there are ways so that it's not
keep it.
monopolized.
No, totally. Yep. Okay, thank you. Al? No.
Uh, I think that's along what I was going to say. Yeah, so I would like to see an increase in the number of accessible parking spaces. There's another group of people that I think would benefit from readier access to parking, and that's people with small children, expectant mothers, those sorts of things where it is difficult to get in and out of the car effectively and safely. And so having those in those areas would be helpful. I don't know how many people have tried to go with child here, and a case and try to get into a store and get anything done. It's
Challenge.
yeah, so it is hard. It is challenging. So there's that part. I'm going to be extremely unpopular with the planners. I'm really sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Yeah.
No. So for me, there's a bit of a trade-off issue with removing parking minimums. So you have situations where if you could end up in a potential situation anytime you don't put requirements on any sector in development to not do a thing, they tend to not do that thing. There is conditions around lending that commercial lenders will require a certain amount of parking because they don't see the development as viable otherwise. But the further you go down that road, potentially as these things change, then you may end up in situations where the public sector is ultimately on the hook for this parking requirement issue. So I think what I would rather see is perhaps more of a cash in lieu option for removing the parking. And that's something that can be invested, put in a capital fund potentially to address parking issues that may arise if things don't actually work out. Just sort of, I don't know, future-proof it to some degree. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. I think it will cause some problem somewhere down the road, but any other questions or comments on that? And I agree with Michael as well. I think that and I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg, to be honest, but it's, I'm happy to see things developed on Front Street and bring it to life, and it's not parking. But I think we have to be careful if we take away all the parking and build things and aren't readily, like, ready to build the next parking lot, we are asking for trouble. Is we do that with some developments now, is we do these things and then say, oh, we're gonna fix that, and then never fix it, and then we haven't fulfilled our part. So I think it's, maybe, yeah, something has to happen at the same time. If you're eliminating, what are you giving back? So maybe there's conditions that go with that, so.
Yeah, so when you were mentioning phasing, it's really
Yeah.
phasing together.
Yeah. It's not a phase. Okay. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
So I was gratified to see the wraparound parking suggestion was taken. Because I think one of the reasons why parking it can be such like an aesthetic eyesore is just, like this broad field of asphalt. And there's nothing in like the character of the town that would really support that, I think. So it's good to see that. And like, I don't know if there's been work done to better integrate parking so that it actually does feel like an integrated piece in the town, like it makes sense. Because we have to have parking. I mean, I think it's brilliant to move that parking that's right there where the Robbie Tough Park is. I think that's, if it can be done, because I think that's what's going to draw traffic down from Main Street along Front Street. I often see like tourists and they make the trip down Elm Street. They just had a lovely walk along Main Street. Then they start going down Elm and you could just see like, their countenance kind of sag a bit as they go, oh, it's just a hardware store. And they look a little dejected as they turn up and yeah. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if there is something like to draw people down and create that density in terms of, the vibrancy that can exist on Main Street also exists on Front Street. And I think figuring out the parking is really important to that. Also, someone mentioned to me that like in similar sized towns in Europe, if we want to use that as a comparison, people have no trouble with like parking outside of town and walking in. Like, I don't see that, like, certainly that parking as proposed is not, really shouldn't, potentially is not a challenge. Really like to eliminate it from where it is and move it out a little bit. Yeah.
Was put into other sites. The parking can be provided. There is that concern about making sure that
That's right.
it is sufficiently convenient. Just stop here at you still have a utility. But yeah, I was wondering if we could discuss some of the trade-offs with potential building here at the corner of Elm. Some comments have been raised about the concern of blocking the view.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge that that's a very valid concern. I mentioned that for Park Park, which you go see the library. Would a building there reduce the prominence of the heritage value of the library? So from a planning perspective, I guess some of the positive trade-offs are that the building here on Elm, I wish I had street view up to discuss this a bit more, but it would help stitch the street together so that as it go down on the street, get to the market, and the library, along a street that has buildings and activities on both sides of that street. You could also move the park because the park is really as good as the buildings outlined in the park. So if we can take that opportunity to create activity along the edge of the park and find the space, create activity along the edge of the space. Then in terms of the heritage value, the real goal is to actually accentuate it. You might not be able to see it from as many places, but to ensure that as you come around that corner, you see it, it's really, you know, the star position in the courtyard that really highlights it there. So, yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that that the Heritage Street and Park are as good as we're able to frame them with building. So building. We don't have to make a decision about that right here, but I just wanted to mention another.
Just want to clarify. Said I like the view. I don't have to keep it. So I actually really like this concept. Like in particular, I'm involved with the oven a little bit, and the idea of sort of creating more of a community public space down in that area, like a civic center where people can focus on, I think is really important. How you do that is 6 of one, half dozen the other, I suppose. But the example that I really think of when I see this design is what they've done in Truro around the normal school, which is now the public library. And so they've maintained that heritage building. They've the farmer's market attached to abutting on one side. The police station is on the other. They've created a village sort of green and in the middle where they program and do activities. It's essentially the same layout, just on a smaller scale along a main street. So I think it works. Yeah, sorry.
Anyone else? I think it depends on what it looks like and what. Hey, if you go back to that picture, I actually think the building that's beside the liquor store should go in the opposite direction, like go this way. So it opens up more space along there. See how that one's facing the street? I think it should go the opposite way. And if that was maybe just 2 stories, it would still draw people in instead of being, but I guess if you're allowed 3, it'll probably be 3. But I think, and again, if it has the same character and everything that Main Street has, and it's longer and narrower where people can still kind of go around it, then maybe it's fine. But I feel like if you put a whole building 3 stories high right there, coming down Elm, you would again feel like your view to Bluminen is gone. Right? Wouldn't it be? I'm a visual person. I'm gonna have to go and see what that actually looks like when I do it again, but I like the squares when we lie them all out and see what the squares look like and things, so that, cause I'm that kind of Lego exercise maybe, but,
I see.
yeah.
I see Home Hardware and a parking lot. I don't see the library
Mm.
personally.
Mm. Yeah. Good idea.
We could set some time aside to
Mm.
down with council.
Yeah.
So we're at 8:20, so
Okay.
want to go to the next
Yep, please. Nice when you're having fun.
favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Basic feedback was to maintain R1 restricted zoning, but do allow 2 units because there are a lot of elderly people with large homes who would like to live around. Ensure backyard suites are smaller than the main. Keep things simple by not using too many overlays. There's concern about losing simplicity of the proposals. No objections to median and residential zones. So these visuals have been updated, so I just want to highlight this. So this shows 2 units in front with back in the R1 zone. And this one shows a single large house with a small backyard suite. So on the current proposal we're bringing to you today to be allowed in our own restricted. Whereas the residential low density allow 2 units up front plus a basement back to allow to. So this. Is there a question?
So could you go back? I didn't realize that we said, yeah, let's put 80, the accessory dwellings or whatever in the backyard, just everywhere, because I can tell you, if anyone in my street put one on in their backyard, I don't think anyone would be particularly happy, because we would be quite literally in each other's kitchen. I mean, I'm practically in Coach Cummins' kitchen now. We can hear each other quite plain as day. So if this is just I thought we said, let's do R1 to be allowed to, as long as the house from the outside looked like a house.
Yeah. Said.
Okay, I was like, did I miss that?
So it's interpretation.
Okay.
Street.
Look like a house.
Look
Yeah.
like a house.
Yeah.
And
In the R1
restrict-
low density restricted.
It would have to have a ton of conditions on that, because again, I wouldn't do it to my neighbors. Holy Dinah, the amount of, tell you my backyard, there's not a whole lot of space to put a unit back there. Barely have enough room to put a shed.
So that would be 4 units potentially on what R1 is now.
No.
3.
2 units.
Actually, there's some
No,
discussion.
that's 3.
But that's 3. Like, so we're saying the facade is the same, then there's 2 in there. Apartment upstairs and downstairs. I think I remember saying that, and that was it.
Right.
That's
That's
what
what I
my memory says.
But
But
if
then
you
you're
put-
saying there could potentially be one in the back. So that's 3. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
That's 3.
So just to clarify, so we propose rules would not be allowed to be. Some of them. And there's
One
just
or the other.
various configurations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. For how you.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you could have one house and then like an accessory unit on there, so that would be 2.
That's.
Okay.
And we actually considered coming back to you with some maps to explore where this would actually be possible.
Oh, yes, I remember
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so we did look a bit at that, and with the large parts of our own district, it would not be feasible.
I
So
think
it's
we need to
only
see
for
those maps.
these restricted lots that are a bit larger, that have a bit more space in back. Urban plan.
I think the maps are helpful to that, because then people have a clear expectation of what that is. Because if we go out to the public and just say, yeah, you can do that, everyone will think, oh, well, that Jody can put one in her backyard. And I'm sure I will hear from my neighbors that that's not going to be very well received. So it's about how you say that to the public. 'Cause
Yeah.
if right now, because I looked
Yeah.
at that too and went, what? We
Yeah.
already said we're going to allow those in the backyard.
But I can remember the size of the lot.
Small, yeah, size of lot, but I think we actually need to see where those lots would actually be. And if people saw them, then it may not be a hot topic at all. It just, oh, there's only 4 of them. In the, it just clarifies.
So we'll continue to hear. So this is the new simplified voting map. Staff are quite satisfied with this achieves the level of simplicity that they were looking for. We do expect that during public engagement, there will be details here that will change. So we don't need to agree on a precise lot by lot, exactly where these things are today. This will go through those steps. So that's the current one. These points are recommendation to create residential descriptive overlay. So this corresponds 1-to-1 with the existing R1. That so we're not. There's no R1 law. Was going to take out of this new RL district. So these areas with the yellow stripes, they have the same. They will have the same rules and way with larger RL, which was important. But the one difference is that they're only allowed 2. And other adjustments could potentially be added, but right.
Maybe I got, sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe I just got confused. So the last slide you were talking, that was residential low density, which used to be R2. And that's why you went up to 3, and now you're talking about the overlay, which was R1. And now you're saying 2 units. Am I correct on that?
That's right.
Okay,
So the yellow stripe overlay, taking the
it's taking the R1.
one, just making it, this only allowed.
Okay.
And the RL.
And then the first one that we were, Jody and I were, where we were talking about and we were a little confused, that that was like the before R2. And when you set up to 4 units, that, because right now I'm in R2, so I'm just trying to get it like straightened. So that was up, that wasn't 4 units before. So it was 2 units, and now you're going to go up to 4 units on that?
So to increase. It's currently 2 units.
Yes.
We're suggesting that goes up to 4.
Okay.
R1 is currently 1. And
So you're doubling those. I just need to get it straight. That's who I'm going to be talking to all the time, both of those zones. So basically in R2, I'll just speak for R2. A lot of the lot sizes in R2 are the same size as R1. So you're suggesting you could put an accessory unit and then have 2 in the accessory unit and then 2 in the house. So that's a big increase on a lot that could be very tiny. So are you suggesting that some of those lots will have to be looked at in size also compared? Okay,
So,
okay, that's okay. Okay, because right now the area that I live in that's R2, there's only single family homes. So if everybody did it, then that's a lot of increase in that small little density if you were able to do it. And I don't think some people have the lot size to do it.
yeah,
So I just wanted to be clear, like when people are talking to me, I understand the R1 overlay. And then can I ask one more question that I'm confused about?
Sure.
So I am a little confused, and I should have asked Devin, and maybe Lindsay can answer this, but you created a new zone over in Maple Avenue where we have the comprehensive development. It's never been used. I believe it's called RDL4. And where does that fit in with the residential low density? Because at one point I saw them combined. What is it? Is it just that's 4 units also? And what's the difference between that and the low density restricted? Because you've never used it and I don't know about it. Like, I don't know what the zoning is. Do you? Like,
RDL4.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would just like a little clarification on that.
We can both speak to that. I think that zone has been used. There's currently 4 units being developed on Penny Crescent.
Okay.
The loop off of.
Okay, that
of
4
Maple
unit,
Avenue,
okay.
And that same zone. But it's a fair question, and it gets confusing, and this chart helps us, helps us kind of. merge
Okay, there we
that.
go,
So
yeah.
The RLD4 zone, you're right, does allow up to 4 units currently, and it would be merged with the RL, low density residential. So that's what's happening here.
So if it only allows 4 units, then what's the difference in that than they're both allowing 4 units?
We approach this to try to simplify it. So essentially we've got a low, medium and high zone.
Mhm.
And we've taken all of our existing zones and merged them into those. The exact breakdown is kind of shown here. What the difference is minimal. I do want to highlight though that all of those zones and the abilities within them are going to be conditional on lot size, lot frontage,
Okay,
lot coverage, parking minimums potentially. And so it would depend. And I think the mayor's comments earlier are a good one. The lots on your side of the street, Mayor McKay, are pretty small and probably wouldn't easily accommodate a backyard unit. But the lots on the other side of the street, for example,
Yeah.
are very, very deep, and those might be feasible for a backyard unit. So that's where that lot size requirement comes in. I'm not sure if I've addressed your question.
I'm still a little confused on the difference between RLD4 and like the existing R2. Because you're in R2, you're going up to say that that's residential low density, which can go up to 4 units, but then you're saying RLD4 is 4 units. Isn't that the same?
That's right, but we're eliminating both of those. We're trying to get rid of R2 and LD4.
But LD4 is a brand new one though, isn't it?
It is, but we're trying to merge it into.
Okay, see, this is where you got me so confused because RDL4 has not even been really used.
Yeah,
And then you've mentioned it and then you're
taking it away.
taking it away. So I'm like, where was it? You know, sorry, I understand now. But I'm glad I understand.
Yeah.
just to walk through. restricted part. Yellow. And there's a new density zone. One part two here. One tree together. That would allow. For so that would be areas. Then this high density zone. Certain opportunity sites. Density could be expected to have. So in these areas, nothing's allowed as of right. Bigger.
You back up, sorry, I'm sorry, Jody.
Go
I'm
on,
sorry,
yeah.
no, you go,
Okay.
Carolyn.
Do you have a question?
But yes, I do. So in the first of this section, you said there was no concerns expressed about medium and high density zones that you're talking about. People I talk to, and maybe it's because I live in a house right now that was the new zone, the RLR, and it's being built right now. And people are horrified, as I am, about what I see going up across in front of me. And then I explain to them that it's going to be 5 and 6 stories up the street. And in other areas of town, most people do not realize that things were changed in 2023. I know it's 2025, but things happen quickly. And, you know, that, so RLR and RLD4 were 2 new zones, and they were introduced. And now what we're saying, for example, with this medium density zone in an area where many of the houses are R3 and R4. Again, I don't understand why RLR was introduced when it was. And now we're saying that, so in 2020, when the plan was done and R3 and R4 were established, in those areas, the maximum, and it varies, I know, but was 24 units per acre. And now it's not clear to me, we're talking about 8, it's the 60 units and the 80 units that are of concern to me, because I know that the building across from me is at approximately 39 units per acre. That's what it works out. It's about a 1 acre piece of land. And I know it's to do with the fact that it's part of that bigger development. And so they average this out. But then if you talk, so if that's 39, and we're now talking about a development agreement or a site plan agreement that allows 60 or 80, what does that building look like? Like to me, because this is a building that's supposed to be 4 stories, but is actually going to be 4.5, because the drawings do not, the measurements are there, but unless you're looking closely, what is the terrace is sitting about 3 foot to 4 feet off the ground.
So to clarify, you have a property in these areas, let's say you own small lots, you wouldn't be allowed to build 80 units. Property would only be allowed to build up to 80 units, very large lot. That there would be other requirements such as requirements, etc. So you wouldn't be allowed to build a building which is allowed. So this rule effectively just apply with another amendment.
But it seems like a higher limit. Why?
Yes,
we're
required by the accelerator.
But not surely in every area. I mean, the thing that I struggle with is in many ways, Wolfville were ahead of the curve when things were approved or changed in 2023. And if we count up the number of units that have been approved in Wolfville, and they were actually built by developers, we've met our targets, we've increased our height. I'm just struggling why we need this to increase the heights in this medium and the high density zone even higher, when if the units zoned as they are right now were actually built by developers, we would actually more than meet our target. I think that's where I'm struggling. We're creating greater disparity. R1, we're saying, oh, well, we were going to go to 4, but now, no, we're only going to go to 2, but suddenly we're going much, it appears, and maybe I just don't understand it enough, but because I'm living through the change that was made last time, and now we're talking about going higher, I have some real concerns, and other people I talk to and who talk to me also do.
Jack Muir?
Okay, so I'm looking at this again. So would this be scenario number 2 that you have up here right now? And you have, this is scenario 1 and 2 combined? Okay, so you just said that you've got the, I understand the R1, moving over to the RL, D4 and the R2, which is RL. And then the proposed, why is there 8 units there? You just said that it's 4 units. Okay. Okay.
I believe you can fit within the lot size and massing requirements that church.
Oh, sorry, that's the light purple on there? Okay.
Dark purple is the higher density.
So
The light purple is, sorry, is medium, residential medium on this map.
That's right. 4 units. Units of village.
So, I think, as we all kind of scratch our heads a smidgen, that I think that we have approved a lot of development up to there. I think those numbers are high. I don't know how much lower we can go, but I feel like I think 80 units. I think those are just high. Even 8 on a site plan. And then we keep flipping back and forth, and I think it almost would have been easier to put them up on boards and go, okay, this is what this looked like, kind of like we did at the open house. And I think we need to see what the lot size looks like and say, okay, there's, maybe there's only 6 of them. I don't know, but the devil's in the details, and I don't think we have the details.
So, and that's major goal.
Okay.
I'm hearing that you would like to see some examples of massive, like what we did for the lower density residential
Yeah.
areas. We would like to see that before meeting.
Yeah, because Carolyn keeps saying the word height, but if we're only allowing three stories, it's only going to be 3 stories. So yeah, so I'm just putting it all into, so if it can only be 3 stories and the lot size is this, what is the maximum use and what does that look like on a lot? Because I can't visualize it unless I see it. Maybe.
It's a great conversation. I think to Tristan's point earlier, like there's the vertical, there's the horizontal, and then you're trying to come up with conditions under which can be applied generally to, if you just look at the map and the actual lot lines within the community, they're so different.
Yeah.
We've got 2 acres here, we've got 4,000 square feet over here, and so you're trying to come up with conditions under which those things could functionally work. And the reality is you can only build on the property that you own. And so, and we want to encourage a variety of different housing forms. And, you know, maybe that's seniors housing, maybe that's more large style communities as well too. And so they may need to meet specific targets associated with that. Like one thing to consider is CMHC and a number of other provincial funding programs won't even look at you if you have under 5 units, period. You don't exist to them. There's no funding available to you. So 2 is actually pretty low. 5 would be preferable because then those non-market housing providers can actually apply for funding. Doesn't mean they're going to get it, but they can apply. So, and again, too, not to toot my horn because I think I did okay. So when I worked temporarily at HRM, and so what we were trying to do is bring in secondary and backyard suites across the entire municipality. But think about the diversity of environments under that condition. There's just situations, and I think to the mayor's point, there are going to be lots that just don't work for this kind of thing, period. And again, you can only build on what you own. So I understand this is pretty dramatic change, but like ultimately the reality from a financial spatial perspective, a lot of this isn't going to happen. We're just creating an environment where it potentially could under the right conditions. So.
Thank you for that.
Yes, just
We're 8:42, so I want to be cognizant of
Okay.
everyone's time.
I
Last
just want to, I think it's a comment. So I appreciate your clarification about height and density. I understand we do need to increase density, but I think some of those numbers we need to understand better, and whether that's height or just density, that's important. And I know this is a detail, but some of the reality based from the experience doing the CDD was that I think it was the RMDU zone. What allows it now to be what we understood initially was going to be only on the Maple lands is now elsewhere in town, is to do with the land use bylaw that talks about rezoning to any other zone. So I just want to put this out here. I know it's not the focus right now, but I do think we can increase density without perhaps allowing other zones to apply to rezone to RMDU. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Was that the last topic? Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay.
Sure. Initially, C2 areas, but it's normal. But there's a recognition that some of the C2s, actually things like schools or former schools or institutions, and so actually there's some benefit to have separate for. So we're going to take the use zone from the these areas, but with some adjustments version of it. Large buildings. And for short-term rentals, so is full-time short-term rentals in zone. So since the C1 is expanding, this would be a somewhat larger area to use a unit percent for a year have you. Whereas in the rest of the town, something else I think to provide that we're still having certain areas at key intersections that we. Just noting that. Yeah, we're still.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I really like the owner occupied because there's three Airbnbs that have been in the west end of town that were shut down because they were illegal in the R1 zone, but they were also owner occupied. And there was also on Hillcrest, there was a house and the owner had a tiny home on wheels in a second driveway, which was amounts to the same thing, I think. And that got shut down too. So these rules would allow that to, both of those situations to be normalized. So I think that's good.
Owner occupied, very good.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Is that the last one? Okay. Thank you. Surprised we made it through, to be honest.
really.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, I think everyone had a fairly good discussion, but does anyone want to contribute to a roundtable, or are we okay with the discussion we had since we're now 20 minutes over? Pretty good.
I just want to say this is a considerable amount of work that's coming in these packages, which is challenging to find time to read, but the work is appreciated.
Yes.
So.
Thank you for that. Do you have one last comment?
I just wonder about.
Can you put your mic on, please? Hon? Thank you.
That as we think about these higher density zones, if a developer were able to buy multiple adjoining lands, how that would impact.
That, yeah.
Yes.
That's in the subdivision bylaw, right? So, okay. Fantastic. I don't have any comments or questions. I just want to say thank you. That was a really good discussion. I think everybody, yeah, it's great. And our next meeting, oh, do you have next meeting is September 11th? It's wonderful. I'll be spending my husband's birthday here. Project team will next present recommendations to council. So it's not coming back here. It's going to council next. Perfect. Okay. All right. We will wait for, you can tell us by email. How's that sound? Whatever's coming next. Okay, fantastic.
That package, do the PAC and council, then do public.
Okay. Sounds like the fall will be busy. Okay, fantastic. Enjoy the break. Awesome. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.